impact of applying chemical insecticides. And also it has a benefit for human and animal health because reducing the application of insecticides, it has a benefit.
How does it affect pollinators of these plants?
These are not affected by this type of insecticide.
But they're finding now that the pollen that you're collecting are contaminated with so many different agents. One of the pollen collapse. I'm just wondering if there were any studies done.
Yeah, there are many studies to determine which insects are affected by this insecticidal protein. So it's been clearly shown that this protein has no effect on honeybees. And I'll tell you a little bit more what are the alternatives. So the other important thing is that it reduces the presence of aflatoxins. So when the insects attack the plant, they make wounds into the plant, and then fungi can infect the plant, and this fungi can produce these aflatoxins, which are very extremely potent carcinogenic compounds. So because these plants are constantly producing this insecticidal protein, the damage that is caused to the plant by the insects is very little. So very little fungal infection, very little toxin production. When you treat with chemicals, you wait until you see the insects killing the plant, and then you apply the insecticide. By then, the fungi are already infected, and you get the production of aflatoxin.
So in India, the farmers, traditionally, after they cut the corn or whatever, they let their cows graze on the field. But after the GMO was introduced, they allowed the cows to graze. The cows died. So, when you say totally innocuous, I don't see any longitudinal studies regarding animals. I see 90-day studies. That's not longitudinal. I don't see long, serious studies about the effects on humans and animals. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I don't see them.
Okay.
Maybe you see them, let me know.
Yeah. I can send you publications of studies that have been already done for about 40 years on this insecticide on humans and animals. Moreover, that example that is being told in India is probably not true. Because if you see Argentina, 100% of the soybean is transgenic, 85% of the corn is transgenic. They have many cows. Argentina is one of the largest producers of cattle in the world. Not a single death of cows has been reported in Argentina. So whoever says that in India is happening something, I would like to see it documented in a scientific paper, because it's easy to say things which are not true. And what is the alternative to the BT? This. Apply insecticide like this. This man here is probably going to be sick because of the chemical insecticide. Nothing will happen to him, but with this, he's going to be sick. In Mexico, every single year, we have about 150 deaths because of intoxication with chemical insecticides. Not a single one with transgenic plants.
But how was it that, I'm Mexican background, how was it that our ancestors grew corn and beans and everything, all these technologies and succeeded so well? And what was the cause for the change? Was it, yeah.
Well, the cost to change is because we now need to produce more food per unit of area. So before, when we had 20 million Mexicans living in a big country in which you could grow beans and corn and peppers together in the same field as a garden, so you can harvest yourself and have your children killing the weeds, because if you don't kill the weeds by hand, they will grow and kill all your crops. Kids didn't go to school because they were killing weeds. That changed because we need more food and people want other jobs. So now we need another technology. And that changed not with GMOs, but it changed with improved varieties and hybrids. So that happened already probably 60 or 80 years ago. It has nothing to do with genetically modified plants.
But did that coincide with the use of chemicals?
No. That was before the use of chemicals. Green Revolution coincided with the use of chemicals, which, by the way, it increased the production of food in a way that it saved the world from a crisis. It had important negative consequences. The abuse of chemicals is now a problem. But we needed more food, and at that time, it was thought it was the best solution to increase food production. Now we have to find what is the best solution to increase the production of food, because in the next 30 years we need to double the amount of food that we produce. We will have more inhabitants, and we need to satisfy the need of the 600 million people that is malnourished in the world.
Well, if all the corn has Bt right in it, won't the insects develop resistance after a while? Because, and you know, that tends to happen. Nature evolves and develops resistance to whatever we think of.
Yes, that's a possibility that if you have corn, only corn with the same Bt protein, they will develop technology. That's why now they have 2 or 3 different Bt genes in the same plant. So the resistance is going to be very difficult for the insect, because you have 3 different proteins that act in a different way, and they cannot become simultaneously resistant to the 3 proteins.
So how does this, the GM plants, how does it affect the microbes in the soil?
That's a very interesting question. This affects more the microbes in the soil.
Okay, we know that. That we accept. My question is the how does it affect the soil? The microbes in the soil.
Yeah. A single gene in a GM crop, it will not make any difference on the soil microbes. It will make a lot more difference if you change, for instance, if you are growing corn and then you switch to soybean, it will make a starting effect on the soil ecology because you change species. But a single gene additional to the plant, it won't really make much difference. But applying fungicide or applying antibiotics to kill bacteria, that makes a difference. Bt, for instance, the insecticidal protein, it has no effect on bacteria. So there is no reason to suspect, and there are many studies that have been done that for some of us are a little bit silly to test what is the effect of a protein that affects insects on soil microbes. But nevertheless, the studies have been done, and they show that there is no effect on the soil.
Is corn only genetically modified with the Bt, or are there other forms of genetically changed corn that have brought in other genes from other sources?
There are many examples of genetically modified corn. To date, there are only probably 2 that have been commercially released. There's insect resistance and herbicide. There are other products that increase vitamin content, antioxidant content, but they haven't yet reached the commercial level. They are still under development. The one crop that is probably going to be released this year is corn that requires less water to grow, which is extremely important for the future of agriculture, but because each day we have less water availability in the world. So those is the next generation, which is very important, not only for the US, but for the rest of the world. Okay, so this is a problem. We cannot do, we either use chemical insecticides or we use genetically modified plants. So it's not just to ask, is there a problem with the genetically modified plants? Is what is the alternative? This is my alternative. So you have to decide as a society, you have to decide whether you prefer this or you prefer genetically modified. There is no other alternative. No application of chemicals and no use of genetically modified plants will cause a disaster, because then the insects will eat our food. So that is the choice. There is no perfect world in which you can simply say, I won't use chemicals, I will not use genetically modified plants. I have a magic solution to prevent insect attacks.
But you're completely leaving out the organic farming, which is proving to be quite successful.
The organic farmers use PT.
Yes,
The
but
same.
when you talk about the fact that it's expensive to apply, you apply BT at certain times. That I have a background in building IPM. I can't see where you can say that the cost is different because you don't know the long-term effects, and eventually you're going to run into resistance. Because I don't care if you have 3 genes for BT or what.
The organic farmers and the genetically modified have the same problem of resistance. The two have the same problem. But here we are eating the bacteria with 3,000 proteins. In the other case, we are eating 1 protein from the bacteria. To decide whether you eat organic or you eat genetically modified. You want to eat 3,000 proteins from the bacteria.
It breaks down in sunlight. You said so yourself.
No, you have to apply many times, and eventually it's a living organism.
I understand that. I understand that. I've seen it used in control of gypsy moths and ornamental tree programs and that type of thing. I understand you have to have reapplication. However, in IPM, you're using these types of things at very specific points in time under very specific conditions, just like you should when you do pesticides. And so it minimizes the use of it. But again, it breaks down quickly and washes away. So it's not something you have to worry about ingesting. It was very successfully used for gypsy moth control.
Oh yes, the same as the GM plants. They are very successful.
One of the criticisms of genetically modified crops is that they are become clonal and then are vulnerable to a new emerging disease. Has that happened yet in places?
Well, that's a very interesting question that has nothing to do with genetically modified. It has to do with improved varieties and with hybrids. So improved varieties were introduced 70 years ago and hybrids 40 years ago. And I can tell you, for instance, how many maize hybrids are cultivated in Mexico? 3. 90% of the growth fruit. Mexico still has not yet approved genetically modified plants. So the problem has been caused by other technologies, not by genetically modified plants. So genetically modified plants are not going to change what is already happening.
Well, yeah, but the idea to address that problem would be to grow crops that had large genetic variation, so that diseases would not wipe them all out, and you could then go to the ones that survived, that would have the resistance.
But that can be done with genetically modified plants or with traditional plants.
Well, I know, but genetically modified plants don't address that problem at all, because aren't they less variable than traditional?
No, you can
crops?
introduce the modification to as many genotypes as you want, because they cross. You can cross your genetically modified plant with as many types of corn or beans or chili peppers as you want. The problem is that the farmer wants homogeneous plants that can be treated in the same way to have a high yield. And that's the concept of hybrids. Why people want hybrids? Nothing to do with genetically modified. It has to do with the use of technologies that came much before, much earlier than the genetic modification. It needs a change in the state policies as to how we want to develop agriculture in the future and use the tools that we have in hand to be more effective and to have a more sustainable agriculture.
No, if you're intending to talk about other modifications to plants besides adding BT theragensis,
Oh yes,
because
if you give me time, I'll do it.
because I think many people aren't as alarmed about BT as they might be about adding the
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate.
Well, we have a very nice solution for you. We want to get Monsanto out of the picture. If you allow us. Quality traits. This man, Ingo Potraikos, devoted 15 years of his life to solve a very important problem. Vitamin A deficiency causes blindness in over 200 million people worldwide. 120 million children in Southeast Asia are blind because they don't eat enough vitamin A. Why they don't eat vitamin A? Because they can only eat rice. Because they don't have money like you to buy tomatoes and peppers and fruits and everything. They can only buy rice. So what the solution was, people suggested, why don't we feed them tomatoes? Why don't we feed them peppers? The problem is who is going to donate the tomatoes, who is going to donate the peppers, who is going to pay for the transport to the people and the distribution to these people who need it. The solution was to produce vitamin A in rice. This man devoted 15 years of his life to do it. They finally succeeded to have rice with enough vitamin A that with a single bowl of rice you get enough vitamin A to prevent blindness. After 20 years of work and field tests to evaluate that the rice was nutritional, that the rice was okay, that the rice was producing the same amount as traditional rice, that it cooks the same as other rice. It was said to be produced right here in the Philippines, to be fed to children. Greenpeace burned the field. They don't care about children getting blind. This has nothing to do with Monsanto. It has nothing to do with Pioneer. It has nothing to do with this one. It's a public initiative which has never reached the people who need it, because there is people who oppose the technology, no matter what happens to the people who need it. You can make fruits that last long. You can increase the shelf life of fruits by many weeks. So this is a normal tomato left on a table for 3 weeks. I will not eat this. I would even give it to my dog. These ones are still perfectly eatable.
Why are they still perfectly eatable?
Because they don't become soft.
But no, what is the mechanics behind it?
The mechanics, because there is a compound in the plant, it's a gas called ethylene. This gas triggers the process of making the fruit soft. So what you do is prevent that this fruit produce the gas.
What else does it
Nothing else. This gas is specific for the ripening of the fruit.
This reminds me of French fries from McDonald's that never go bad. You know what I'm saying? You've seen those pictures of the French fries from McDonald's. Years later, they look perfect. French fries. Scary stuff. Frankenstein food, really. I'm saying, I'm just being honest.
Yes, actually, but you know, 50% of tropical fruits are lost on site because they take water. So imagine what could be done with this technology, how many people we could feed with this technology, how many poor people would be fed with this technology.
I just wanted to add to that, the tomatoes on the right will definitely rot. They'll rot like any other
They
tomato.
will rot.
It's a matter of the firmness of the fruit, literally the structural integrity of the fruit.
And so the gas does not affect our intestinal tract.
Well, this one produces the gas, this doesn't.
So the natural one.
Ah.
So the natural ones are the killer
Well,
ones.
you wouldn't eat it when it was rotten, if you had any sense at all.
But it produces gas.
You want to keep young and healthy, you can have tomatoes with lots of antioxidants. Nice.
So if you, the transgenic tomatoes without the ethylene production, if you put them in a chamber with a banana or something that does produce ethylene, would they then ripen just like any other tomato? It's just they've turned off their own production.
But don't they have to ripen eventually if you want to eat them?
They become mature, but they don't soften that much. So they are firm, but they don't soften. If you put them with a banana, they will soften. As any other tomato, they are not softened.
What was the genetic modification that accomplished that?
Yes. Or just the same gene from tomato. Exactly the same gene you just put in the other one. So
they
no
altered
strange
the
genes,
structure.
nothing
No
weird.
fish? No fish?
No fish, none of that.
They altered the structure of the gene.
Of the native gene of this tomato. It's a genetic modification that you can do the same for mangoes and papayas and chirimoyas and guanabanas. You can do the same.
Was it done technologically to change the structure of the gene?
Yes, it will work right. You can also do it naturally.
With breeding.
With mutations that are done with nuclear energy that the breeders use. It has been achieved for some crops that way, which is a little bit more scary than genetically modified.
Yeah. So these tomatoes, their seeds can reproduce.
Yeah,
Normal.
normal, perfect. No problem. We have actually papayas that do this. So, people say that this technology was only beneficial for the US and Canada. During the first 10 years, in vitro technology favored mostly the US and Canada. 2013, the red line is the use of genetically modified plants in developing countries, or developing countries or emerging economies, whatever you call it now, because it's rather confusing. Because this includes Brazil, China, India, Mexico, Peru, Guatemala, El Salvador, Ukraine, Egypt, Iran, Cuba, Africa, not much in Africa. South Africa is the only country. Now, developing countries produce more GM food than developed countries. So, 18 million farmers are using the technology in 27 countries, 175 million hectares.
Do you know what the overall percentage is? The overall, the regular 3%, but what's the overall percentage of crops that are being grown in the world of GMO?
The overall is about 20% of the crops in the world.
So how is it that, I forget the number, it keeps increasing all the time, but at least 65 countries in the world have labeled GMO crops or banned them. Why is that?
Why is that? Mainly ignorance.
65 countries are ignorant.
And one of them is my own country.
I find that a bit arrogant, that 65 countries are ignorant, stupid, they don't understand.
No, I didn't say stupid.
Ignorant, okay. Whew.
You think these
That's a
18
lot of
million
countries.
farmers are stupid?
I think that they may have been sold a good product in a view to get profit. I believe that to be true, yeah.
You know that probably 80% of the processed food products in the US contain GMO.
I know that.
And you eat them.
No, I don't.
That's
There is no
what I was
way
about to
that-
ask, if you had to label everything that had corn-based fructose in it, wouldn't that be pretty much everything on the grocery?
Yes,
Pretty much.
yes, pretty much,
That's what I
pretty much,
believe.
everything.
So then if you label everything, then go ahead and label it, and then it all means nothing.
The problem with labeling, that's a very interesting, how do you label? Would you label saying that this product contains GM components, and because of that it contains less pesticides, less herbicides, and it's probably healthier than organic food? So we label it that way? Or we label it contains GMO with saying nothing, and people assume that it's dangerous because it contains a label saying it contains GMO.
Why would they?
What do we label? What is the purpose of labeling? The purpose of labeling is to inform the people
Yes.
about the composition
Yes.
of the product. Then it should have an analysis of pesticides, insecticides, and so on. If we do that, organic producers will be in trouble. You know that organic producers use copper sulfate to prevent fungal infections, and that copper is extremely toxic. And if we do an analysis, not a single organic product would be in the market. So we have to really see what we want to do.
Well, copper is also an essential element in
In
basic biochemistry,
minute
so the
amounts.
important thing is how much copper ends up in the food.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
if you treat plant
We
copper
have to
sulfate,
make an analysis and say how much copper you have.
right? Maybe I want copper in my food.
Yeah, you want,
I want
if you
some.
want to turn blue, you want to. Well, let me tell you now two examples that are
You get it from your phone.
So this is an extraordinary example. Dennis is here. He's one of my great heroes. And that's why I'm surprised that we have this discussion in this state.
Well, it's its own country too.
Let's see how this
It's a.
But that's a different discussion.
So I told you that in 1986, technology was developed to make plant resistant against viral infections. So here, this is a papaya infected with the ring spot virus, papaya ring spot virus. You see these rings here, very typical. All papayas in Mexico have these rings because about 100% of the papaya fields are. So every year or every day, because I eat papaya every day, I eat the virus, the whole virus. With the DNA, with the RNA, with the proteins, I eat it. And this is what it causes the virus. Usually you can grow papaya for 10, 15 years with a high productivity. If it's infected, productivity drops very rapidly. So the virus started to become detected in Hawaii in the 70s. If I make a mistake, Dennis, please. This is where papaya is produced, the main papaya producer area. The problem is that then the virus started to migrate close to food, coming from the other side. So this is, I borrowed this slide from them. We met about 7 years ago in Paris. We had some presentations there. In a meeting sort of like this, talking to the French people. This is a field of papayas in Puna in 1992. This is a field of papayas in 1994. The virus arrived and completely devastated the papaya production in Hawaii. So the technology was in place to take a piece of the virus, introduce it into the plant, and make a sort of a vaccine against the infection. Then is we, together with Jerry Slinton and other people, produce these transgenic papayas that are resistant to the virus. So this is how it grows, the normal papaya infected by the virus, and this is the resistant. 1996, you see the transgenic papaya and the normal papaya. You see the difference? It's safe papaya production.
I understand at least the rudiments of how in animals you can develop an immune response to foreign pathogen. But I haven't a clue how this works in plants. So how does the expression of a viral protein then result in an immunity of the plant to the virus?
It's a complex system now that we understand better. Originally, it was thought, and perhaps it's the easiest explanation, the virus has a coat, a protein coat, that protects the RNA. So when it enters the plant, the coat is dissolved so that the RNA of the virus can multiply. Thousands, millions of copies of the RNA, then it produces the protein again, and each molecule of RNA is covered by the protein coat so that it can go to another cell or to another plant. So if you already have the coat in the cell, when the virus gets naked, the plant coats it again.
The plant what?
The plant coats again the virus.
Oh.
So it cannot reproduce. That's how it works. Now we know it's more complex and it has to do with RNA. That it produces an RNA that interferes with the life of the virus. But it'll be more complex to explain. So, but it works, it's very effective, and it probably works for every single viral infection in any single plant. There are many examples of these things.
When I bought my acreage down in Lower Puna, it was about 28 acres of cacao, and then when the gentleman left, well, actually when he was farming, he'd come through and spray with Roundup, of course, 1 week, and a couple weeks later, copper sulfite. Why are we still spraying copper sulfite today? Sulfate.
Because that's copper sulfite, sulfate.
Whatever it is.
That's for fungi.
So would you need those to file?
With copper sulfate, no. Transgenic, yes.
But they're spraying the transgenic papaya.
Yeah, because there is no genetic modifications have not been allowed to produce fungal resistance.
And did I hear you say you wouldn't eat those?
The ones that are sprayed with copper sulfate now, because of the copper sulfate. So, this technology was extremely successful. But in many countries, we still have a problem. And why we cannot use this technology? Because we are still discussing this problem. Whether genetically modified food causes cancer, whether genetically modified foods cause malformation in children, whether genetically modified foods are going to destroy biodiversity. And what we are doing, we are losing biodiversity because the virus is killing everything. We are not producing enough papaya, and people have to migrate to the United States to work, so they abandon their fields. 250,000 farmers from Mexico migrate to the US every year because their farms don't produce anymore. They cannot make a living out of that. That's why we are losing biodiversity, because these farmers who are keeping the biodiversity have not enough resources to live, so they migrate to the US. There are many phantom towns in Mexico in which there is only children, women, and elders, because all the young men and They are going in the States sending green money back. Not green because it's ecological, but green because it's green in colors. So Dennis is the only one who has succeeded in the world to commercialize a genetically modified crop besides corn. It's the only example in the world in which this has been successful. And I tell you why. Because Dennis started early enough in Hawaii. So people didn't ask so many tests to have it commercial. Now, people is asking so many tests that only Monsanto and DuPont can comply with all these tests. So Monsanto and DuPont and a few other companies are very happy because the more you ask, the higher the cost to do the regulatory process, and that makes monopoly. And now we complain that Monsanto has a monopoly in food production. And why is that? Because we are asking so many questions that they are only ones who can pay for it. And the problem is that the more they ask, the happier they are. Because now it costs to develop a transgenic crop, perhaps between $1 or $2 million. The regulatory process to have it commercialized would cost between 20 and 100 million. There is not a single university or research institution in the world capable of affording the cost of approving a genetically modified. So that's why Dennis, with a very successful example, could solve a problem, and he tried to do the same in Thailand and in other places. They produced the papaya, they had the plant resistant, but at the end, they were not effectively used because the government said, oh, we don't know about it.
How long longitudinal, human longitudinal studies are you aware of? How long?
How long were?
How long are the longitudinal human studies that you're aware of?
1996 to 2014, 18 years.
And done by?
And done by us.
Us who?
Everybody.
No.
We have been eating corn and soybean genetically modified for the past 18 years. I haven't heard any report from FDA, NIH, the Mexican health system, of a person who has a problem related to the consumption of genetically modified. So in Mexico, we eat them, but we cannot grow them. So we import 20 million tons of corn every year. But we cannot grow it. So we eat it. We are still here. We eat transgenic tortillas, we eat transgenic tacos.
You're here, but look at the cancer rates that have increased, the diabetes rates, the obesity rates, the gut IBS problems, on and on and on.
And that has any relation with genetically modified food?
I'm not blaming it all, but let's look at
Any,
that.
not all.
Let's
Any
look
relation.
at that.
Any relation. The increase in cancer and diabetes and obesity started much before than the production of genetically modified. Much before. So we cannot blame or associate the consumption of genetically modified food with those things, because the trends were already way up before
So
they were
it's
introduced.
totally innocent.
Until proven guilty.
Huh?
Until proven guilty.
Oh, that's what I'm asking for, is the studies to prove guilt or not guilt.
There are many studies proving innocence. There are probably about 300 or 400 publications on toxicity studies, allergenic studies.
Produced by?
Why? I'll show you. If you
Okay.
allow me a little bit later, I'll give you a very nice example of who did this. Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if you could move in talking about, the decision to add pesticide resistance to GMO, because it seems like the health studies that, do give some cause for concern about decreased immunity in stream resident fish or creatures like in a stream where they're getting agriculture runoff. It seems like those,
Pesticide or herbicide?
I'm sorry, herbicides that those health concerns or the response of those organisms seem like the response you would expect from the herbicide exposure. So it may be that focusing on all GMO is not the issue, it's really about the herbicide resistance.
Allow me to give you an example. We come from Hawaiian technology to Mexican. So I'm going to talk to you about two important problems. Fertilization. Fertilization is a problem because the excessive use of fertilizers causes health problems and ecological. And moreover, phosphorus, which is one of the two major components of fertilizers, nitrogen and phosphorus, is a non-renewable resource. So if we keep using phosphorus fertilizers, we will deplete the reserves and we will have no fertilizers within 70 to 100. And then there will be very little agriculture. The other problems are weeds. That's why we need herbicides. That's why Monsanto has made tons of money, because you have to control weeds. So they make crops that are resistant to herbicides. So you can apply the herbicide, kill everything with your crop. So high productivity. The problem is that we are using excessive amounts of herbicide. And that causes problems not because the plant is genetically modified, but because of the residues of the herbicide in the soil, in the water, and in the plant. So, why do they use an excess of fertilizers in agriculture? Of the phosphorus, the phosphate fertilizer we apply in agriculture, the crop uses 20% and 80% is lost. It gets fixed into the soil, it gets consumed by soil microbes, because microbes also need phosphorus as a nutrient, and finally ends up in the sea and causes algae bloom. This red. So, what we wanted to do is to reverse this equation and make plants that can assimilate 80% and we lose only 20%. Then we could reduce the amount of fertilizers and we reduce the ecological problems and reduce it. So, plants and most organisms use phosphate as the only chemical form that can be used as a nutrient. So that's why nobody thought before to use a different chemical compound as a phosphorus source. So we studied some bacteria that were able to use different compounds. For instance, phosphate. And this bacteria self-fertilizes. It takes up phosphate, converts it into phosphate, and then it can grow. Why is phosphate better? And this is known already for a long time. After the Second World War, the chemists suggested that phosphate was a better fertilizer than phosphate. Why? Because the phosphate solubility is dependent on pH. Phosphate in acid soils and alkaline soils precipitates and is not available for plants. Phosphate is less reactive than phosphate with soil components, so it's more available for plant application. Phosphate is already used in agriculture as a fungicide, but it's actually not a fungicide. It activates the defense mechanism of the plant, and the plant defends against fungal infection. What does the FDA say? it has no toxicity against humans or animals. In fact, they say at the end, phosphite might have a little bit lower toxicity than phosphate. And phosphate we everything. The problem is that plants cannot grow using phosphite as a fertilizer. If you apply phosphate, they grow happily. If you apply phosphite, they don't grow well because they cannot use it as a nutrient. So the question is, can we take the gene from the bacteria, put it in the plant, so that now the plant can grow on phosphate? And the answer is yes. These are normal plants growing in media that has phosphite as the only phosphorus source. They cannot grow. You make a genetic modification, now they can. So the question we ask is then, if we have this plant, we can use now phosphite as a fertilizer. The plant is going to take it off, convert it into phosphate, and now we can grow. If it's true what we say, that it's less reactive with soil components, that the soil microbes are not going to compete with the plant for this limiting resource, we should be able to reduce the amount of fertilizer we need to apply to achieve the same level of productivity. So these are the plants. These are normal plants growing in phosphate and growing in phosphite. They don't grow in phosphite. These are genetically modified plants growing in phosphate at different regimes of phosphate, 10, 30, and 60 milligrams per kilo of soil. You can already see here that with 10 milligrams of phosphate, this plant grows less than with 10 milligrams of phosphate. If you see here, this is the amount of grams of seeds produced by the plant. With 60 milligrams per kilo of phosphate, the plant produces this amount of seed. With 30 milligrams per kilo, you produce the same with phosphate. So you can reduce 50% the amount of fertilizer you need. So that's already interesting, because then the farmer needs to buy less fertilizer. Because the plant is using most of the fertilizer, you reduce the ecological impact and the problems that it has on human health. But the other problem that we were talking is weeds. Can we also control weeds using this technology? This is a competition between the genetically modified plants, the little ones are here, with a weed. This is a grass type of weed. If you don't fertilize, the soil already contains a little bit of phosphorus, so they grow. Weeds grow better because they evolved that way. So weeds are very competitive, they are very aggressive, so they grow better than the crop, and it will eventually kill the crop. If you fertilize, what you do is you promote more the growth of the weed. That's why you need a herbicide to kill it. But what happens if you fertilize with phosphate? The weed cannot use the phosphate, and your crop can use the phosphate. Your crop grows, and the weed is still there. You don't kill it. But now your crop is more competitive. So with a single technology, you reduce amount of fertilizer, and now you don't need herbicides. So is people concerned about the abuse of herbicides? With this technology, you can reduce or eliminate the need of using herbicides.
So why did they need to go to Roundup Ready crops then? If this would be a
because this is new. This is what we want to do to eliminate Roundup Ready.
Right now, with industrial scale application of Roundup, there's lots of bare soil, which is a potent natural selective environment for evolution of Roundup resistance in weeds. Would it be possible for people, say in underground labs, to make transgenic Roundup resistant weeds and then use those and accelerate this process?
Yes.
Is it easy to do?
Yes.
good terrorist ideas?
But that has nothing to do with science. The way people can apply technology, for good or bad, has nothing to do with science, but politics and economics. So the interesting thing of this system is that the agroecologists people who like ecology, they say that weeds should not be killed because they help to prevent soil erosion and water evaporation. The problem is if you don't control them, they kill your crop. With this system, they don't kill them. They are still there. They protect your soil against erosion and water evaporation, but they don't compete with your crop. So with this system, we are trying to solve two problems: the excessive use of fertilizer and the use of herbicides. This is technology developed by the lady there and my wife.
Phosphate is relatively available and cheap. How does that compare with phosphite?
Phosphite is about 30% more expensive now than phosphate. I must remind you that we use currently 75 million tons of phosphate in agriculture. Phosphite is used in industry and other things, so it's producing at lower scale. So, but anyway, let's assume current prices today, phosphite is $10 per 100 kilos, and phosphite is $13 per 100. You need half phosphite. So it will cost you $7.5 versus 10. So there is already an economical. Herbicides, glyphosate, it will cost you $25. If you can reduce that to $5, then you will have a net benefit of $23. But the most interesting thing is not the economical benefit, the ecological benefit, and the health benefit, because you are significantly reducing the amount of chemicals you are applying. And this can only be achieved with genetically modified. And they are completely normal, so they produce, there is no problem.
Are the entities that are producing the phosphate GMO, are those more academic, like Monsanto is not moving in that direction?
Of course, yeah, well, we are a federal government, Mexican federal government institution. So Monsanto is not interested in something that doesn't make them a high profit. Why we don't have more virus-resistant crops in the market? Because economically it's not so interesting for us. Why we don't have genetically modified crops that are not corn and soybean and canola and cotton? Because all the others are less important for Monsanto and DuPont and Limaran and all these big crops. Benefit for them is the major driving force. So the major crops that make them the most money.
So globally, how much attention is on this technology, or is it mostly coming out of your institution?
It's only coming from ours.
So you need global attention on the idea.
Well, we have got some attention for it. The only way to really get this into the market is through a company. So we created a Mexican company with a completely different philosophy than us. So this company is going to produce this product to sell it to the big farmers in quantities, but it will donate for free the technology for small farmers to whatever is needed. So we have money already from the Gates Foundation to take this technology for corn and cassava for African countries. So it's a completely different approach, and that's what we want to do. We want to show the public that a public institution can generate a technology that is useful to the farmer, and it has an ecological benefit, and it has a health benefit.
Have there been any feeding studies done on the plants that are produced with the phosphite versus phosphate? No, I mean, have you done any animal feeding studies?
Animal feeding studies. We haven't done animal feeding studies, that's the next step. But we have done chemical analysis of the plant. And the chemical analysis says that they are identical in chemical composition. There is no residue of phosphite because all the phosphite is converted to phosphate in the plant. So there is no chemical differences between the two plants. So we don't expect any difference in the animal fitness studies, but they need to be done. We haven't done them yet because they are expensive, so we need to get money for this to do that.
I'm gonna stand up really fast. If I can ask everyone just to hold your questions for now, just so that we can get to the end. So we can finish sometime before midnight tonight. And then at the end, then we'll open it back up to questions again.
So, just quickly, people say that it's only Monsanto benefiting from the technology. That's not true. Monsanto is taking a big chunk of it. But, for instance, the economical benefit for Argentinian farmers in the past 10 years is over $80 billion. So they have made more money than ever before. And they have created 1 million jobs because agriculture is so good in Argentina. It's so good that President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner created a new tax specific for genetically modified plants. She wants a chunk of the money as well. So, of course, the farmers are not happy because they say, why you tax genetically modified soybean and you don't tax traditional soybean? And this is the same case in Brazil and China and India and so on. So it's, you already said it, is this a global success? No. People who, countries that need it the most are not using it. We import the products from other countries, we eat them, but we don't produce it. Sounds like a bad business. We eat them, but we don't produce it. We don't get economical benefit than the Argentinians, and we don't get the jobs than the Argentinians. We are creating jobs in the US and Canada and Argentina and Brazil, because we don't produce it, but we eat them. We can read transgenic papayas from Bangladesh. Walmart sells Hawaiian papayas. So what are the risks? There are many risks. Human health, toxicity, allergies to the environment, superweeds, increased agrochemical use, biodiversity, effects on non-target insects. So there are many questions. The problem is, what are the alternatives? What's the effect on non-target insects of the BT insecticide, protein, or a chemical insecticide? That's the question. Notice whether BT could have an effect on non-target insects, on bees, for instance. But what happens if you use a chemical insecticide? You kill the bees. You kill the bees, no doubt. So those are the alternatives. In terms of health, so people say, tell me what has been said. This is the World Health Organization. What do they say? With the available information today, it can be concluded that the potential risks of GM food to human health are similar to those of conventional crops. There is no evidence that they could, not that they can, that they could cause any harm to humans or animals. That's the World Health Organization. This is an example, a real life example in China. People is using BT rice versus conventional rice with chemical insecticide. So how much insecticide they use? If they use GM crops, 2 kilograms per hectare. The ones that don't use it, 21 kilograms per hectare. 10 times more. Health problems. People using GM plots, no one went to the hospital. Non-GM crops, 10% of the farmers went to the hospital with different types of intoxications with the chemical insects. So, which one do you prefer? Europeans. Who pays for this information? This is the European Union, the countries that are the most against GM food. Yeah, correct? Yeah, yeah. So this new publication presents the results of 50 projects involving more than 400 research independent groups in the European Union, with research grants of over 200 million euros, not a single cent from Congress. Conclusion of this study, 15 years of studies. The main conclusion to be drawn from the efforts of more than 130 research projects covering a period of 25 years of research, you ask me how many years? 25 years of research, and involving more than 500 independent research groups, no companies involved, is that biotechnology, and in particular GMOs, are not per se more risky than conventional farming technology. That's the new report of the European Commission. And these are the people who are the most against. This was published in 2013. So what are the conclusions of my presentation? We need more and higher quality food. We want to live healthy, we want to live for longer. So we need to at least double food production in the next 30 years within the same area, and no more area for agriculture, with less water, and we need to use less chemicals. The question is, gene technology is quite promising. Are we going to neglect the use of this technology? So it shows that the society as a whole has to take. We have to make a responsible decision, but in the name of the world. Not Hawaii, not your family, but the whole world, because this impacts everything. For instance, I work with avocados. An avocado plant has a life cycle of 20 years. So if I want to use traditional breeding, it will take me between 80 and 100 years to generate a new variety. If I use genetic modification, I can introduce insect resistance, higher fertilizer use efficiency, lower the need of water in a single step. All for the benefit of people, all for the benefit of the ecology. However, Mexico exports avocados to the European Union. If the Europeans decide not to accept genetically modified avocados, Mexican farmers cannot benefit from the technology, with the risk that they might lose their production because they have serious problems now of different diseases and water availability. So it has to be a decision taking into account the interests of all the stakeholders. Not only the rich people who has enough money to buy food and decides to buy organic food even if it's more expensive. We need to think about the people in Africa, we need to think about the people in Asia, we need to think about the people in Latin America. So that's the decision we have to make as a society. And that is a responsibility, because certainly there is no technology in the world that represents zero risk. There are always risks in traditional breeding, in mutagenesis, in GMOs. Everything has a risk. But one has to balance what is more risky, chemicals or genetic modification.
But I suppose we could solve economic issues as well.
Economic issues?
Yeah, so all people could afford good food.
Tax the 1%.
That'll be perfect. If we can increase taxes in the US and distribute in the world, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. 50% tax to the US. And distribute 30% to the rest of the world.
Yes! I'll take it.
We should talk to Obama. We should write a letter.
How many years have we had herbicide-ready crops, and do you think the health studies would be different if they separated out the health impacts from crops that are herbicide resistant versus just BT enhanced crops?
Oh yes, yes, they would be completely different if they were separated. The BT poses no risk at all.
Right.
The herbicide, because of the residues, have a health problem. Now, let me tell you something. I don't like Monsanto, but glyphosate is the less dangerous herbicide of all existing herbicides.
Are you familiar with
That
the
statement is
research
very
from
frightening.
Dan
It's very
Hoover?
frightening that we use the less dangerous one.
There was a
That's the
researcher
most
that I
dangerous,
read
that's
about in Illinois or somewhere in the Midwest, Huber, Dr. Huber, and Monsanto told me it was completely discredited, I don't know, but he had said that he was seeing a release of a unknown microorganism from the soil after glyphosate treatment, and he said it was causing spontaneous abortions in cattle. So he really felt that the application of glyphosate was changing the soil microbial community, suppressing some members, and enabling.
Parents is from Purdue.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Glyphosate is not specific against plants. It also kills bacteria. So it's certainly not the genetically modified plant. So we need to make clear things. The genetically modified plant has no effect on the soil microbiology. The glyphosate, it has an effect because it kills every organism that produces certain type of amino acids. So it doesn't affect us in that sense because we don't produce the amino acids. We eat them from the plants, or from cattle, or from fish, or whatever. But all the plants and all the microbes that are able to produce their own amino acids, aromatic amino acids, if you add glyphosate, they will be killed. So it affects the soil ecology because of that. Whether that leads to the production of bacteria that causes abortion in the cows, that I don't think so. But certainly it changes the ecology of the soil. There is no doubt about that.
The production of herbicide-resistant plants seems to be, it's really muddying the water. It's causing a lot of the controversy about anti-GMO. And I wish we could separate it out as a different issue.
Yes, that'd be quite sensible. The problem is that herbicide resistance is the money maker.
Why is pesticide or herbicide use increasing so much if these herbicide-resistant crops are so useful? I mean, I know they say they apply herbicide less, but we still have huge increases in the
I don't have the graph here. That's a confusion as well. We are not using more. The total amount of herbicides used is lower than before. The total amount of glyphosate has increased enormously. So let's say, I don't know the numbers, but let's say if we're using 10 million tons of herbicides per year, now we are using 7. But of those 10 million tons, before only 1 million tons was glyphosate. But now from the 7 million tons we are currently using, 6 million tons are glyphosate. Because it's completely the dominant herbicide. Because the plants are so successful. The technology has been so successful that the farmers plant it.
I thought you were going to talk more about diversity of varieties. And when you produce a GMO, say, for ring spot, or for the corn borer, that's one thing. But then you're growing a crop over a wide area with reduced variety because they're all GMO variety. There's more than one thing that can hit the crop. So say a fungus comes along that corn is not resistant to. Now you've got reduced crop varieties, and you're increasing the chance that they'll be susceptible to the next thing that comes along.
Yes, that's correct, and that we have to solve, but has nothing to do with genetic modification. And I give you an example.
It has to do with what is done with it. When people listen to you, saying, no, you should not be growing all those varieties, you should be growing our variety. Now, well, if you look at what's happening, that is what's happening.
Let me tell you an example. In Mexico, 30 years ago, we grew probably 10 different papaya varieties. About 20 years ago, the Cubans came with a new variety, not genetically modified. The Maradol variety has better taste, it produces more, and it lasts longer. So in Mexico now, there is only a single variety grown, which is good. And it has nothing to do with GMOs, or nothing, or nobody telling the farmers to grow Maradol. It's simply because they realize that that variety is more competitive and better accepted by the public. So what they want to do is sell the variety. So I agree with you, it's a problem of using a single variety, but it's not an inherent problem of GMOs. It's a problem that has to do with the way we use agriculture and the way the farmers want to produce. So we need to change the politics, we need to change the economics, we need to change many things to be able to convince the farmers. We have to subsidize them more. We already subsidize them quite a bit. We need to subsidize them more so that they can use different varieties. And we can make them all GMOs, if you want. Or not make them GMOs, but we need to subsidize to make them use them.
Could you address a little bit what's going on in Mexico in terms of loss of some of the heirloom and landrace varieties of corn because of the vast amounts of corn that are being grown that are genetically modified?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Mexico doesn't grow genetically modified corn. There are a couple of field experiments that have been allowed, maybe 30 acres, no more than that. And we have lost a lot of the diversity of corn. It has nothing to do with GMO. It has to do with the hybrids, traditional hybrids that have been produced. And I said before, farmers are migrating. The corn doesn't produce enough. Corn yields in Mexico is about an average of 1.8 tons per acre. In the US, it's 12. So when you produce 10%, and the cost of the corn is the same, how can you live? The farmers have 2 hectares, so they have 3.6 tons per land, and each ton costs about $300. So can you make a living with $1,000 per year? So they migrate. That's the cause of the loss of diversity. It has nothing to do. Whoever told you that it's GMOs in Mexico is completely lying, because it has never been allowed in Mexico.
But it's possible to come in when the people who migrate go back and forth and bring seed with them.
It is possible, yes. There have been studies in Mexico suggesting that perhaps 0.01% of the corn is genetically modified, either accidentally or purposely produced by the farmers coming back and forth. But the percentage is so low that it could have no effect on the loss of diversity. So those are plain lies, and people should go and know the facts. So how much genetically modified corn is grown in Mexico, and how much diversity we have lost?
Yes, I think that GMOs is not really the problem. It's more the modern industrial, economic, and agricultural system, the broad way we do things throughout the world, the modern commercial model that is the problem. These are just tools. They should be thoroughly and completely studied, and there's always gonna be balance. But I think the whole system is corrupt. And that's the big elephant, that's the big thing we don't wanna face, is that this thing we depended on for so many couple hundred years, doesn't work, isn't gonna work. And in the long run, it's gonna collapse around us, and that's the problem.
I fully agree with you. The problem is the system, not the technology. We have to balance things. So if we would go all for organic farming, food production will probably decrease 40 or 50%. Because productivity is lower in organic farming. And they cannot handle very large areas.
You got a picture of a blue rose. Can you explain how that was done?
This and this is the same, using the genes from grapes that produce these antioxidants that seem to be quite healthy. Now you have them in tomatoes, so you don't get drunk, but you get the benefits.
I read that one. The pink genes are still in there. We just added the.
Sorry?
The pink genes are still in the.
Yeah. It's a mix of red and blue. So the red color is still there. So all the carotenes present here are still here. It's just that the blue color is more intense, so that's why it's called blue. And this was done actually independently by a British group that has nothing to do with industry. You know when this is going to be commercialized? Never. Because there is no economics. Poor people cannot buy this.
You know what? Here in Hilo, we can buy an apple that's been mixed with a grape. What do we call them? Grapes. Yeah, right here in Hilo, you can buy them. I'm not going to buy it, but someone will.
Yeah. I mean, people who have money, yes, but not the rest of them.
Just to, they're just sprayed with grape flavor.
Oh, they're just sprayed with it?
Yeah. There is a genetically modified apple in the pipeline that hasn't been released, and it's traced to prevent brown. That's the reasons for it. But there are no gene points.
They spray it with grape juice. Oh.
Great flavor.
I hear people mention over and over again mentioning problems with industrial agriculture and the way our society is taking agriculture in industrial society, and now we have GMOs. So I'm wondering, how sustainable do you think is the practice of producing genetically modified crops in intelligent ways after the potential downfall or collapse of an industrial society?
Well, I think it should become a very powerful tool. I tell you what we thought. I was very young when we developed the technology, and perhaps we were very naive. But we thought it was a wonderful discovery for small farmers, because it's technology that is present in the seed. So the farmer doesn't need to buy machinery, doesn't need to buy additional stuff, and it can reproduce the seed without any problem. So we thought, this is absolutely marvelous for a small farmer. The problem is the system.
Yeah.
The technology was developed in public institutions. So the irony of life. Belgium, Holland, France, and Germany. A little bit in the States, but not much. What happened? Monsanto, and we should acknowledge they had a vision, and they thought this is very good technology. So they bought the rights to all the patents of the European universities. But the technology was developed by Europeans with a completely different idea of what to do with the technology. So what happened is that this thing got absolutely corrupted. And perhaps I shouldn't say that much. For instance, we own some of those patents. Monsanto took us to court and took it from us. So they spent over $70 million in court to take the patents away from us. So I should be rich by now, and I'm very poor. So I'm not trying to make a favor to Monsanto, promoting this technology, because I'm very proud to have participated in the development of the technology. And I'm still proud, and I will die proud, because this is a very powerful tool for the farmers. Although Monsanto owes me probably $1.5 billion in patents.
Isn't genetic modification, though, used a lot of other ways, like to modify yeast to make medications and...
Yeah. So we discuss about crops, but you don't think about cheese, for me. You know that all the cheese you eat comes from genetically modified organisms? Every single piece of cheese, even organic farmer cheese. The protein you use to coagulate the milk is produced by genetically modified organisms. Growth hormone, insulin, vaccines, they are all genetically modified. But why we discuss food and we don't discuss the others? Wine, beer, not tequila, because tequila doesn't have genetic modification.
I'm going to ask the question again about the longitudinal human health studies. You were saying we're all experiments, but there's no control and there's no experimental group. But what is the longest human feeding study that you're aware of on GMOs?
25 years. Not sent by me. I lost it. The European Union, 25 years.
No, one study, because one of the criticisms of the studies on genetically modified foods is that they're not long enough. They don't go on, like maybe they'll go for 90 days or something, which is not long enough for health problems to emerge. But so like an individual study, what's the longest individual study you know, and how many days did it go?
Well, you are talking about experiments with rats.
Okay.
So the experiments with rats have gone for about 2 years, which is the lifespan of the rat.
Mm-hmm.
But no negative effects.
I have seen some with negative effects.
There are some reports which are really tricky, using mutant rat strains that are very prone to cancer, that suggest that the gene food causes cancer. But those are not very solid studies.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the term studies in this lame, irresponsible county council. They could have contacted people back. I grew up in Iowa. They've had some various forms of GMOs back there for 30, 40 years. Billions of meals have been eaten with no side effects attributed to unhealthy GMO. I'm 70 years old. My health is as good as anybody in this room or anybody in this state. And it's going to be better than that for the next 50 years, but over and above that. If they want studies, go back and talk to the people who've been eating this GMO for 40, 50 years. John Wayne, right? Michael Jordan, way back when. If you want studies, go talk to the people who've been eating it. Thank you.
Those are the longest.
Maybe if we can get one final question, and then we can say thank you. If there are any.
We grew up in the same era in the mid-80s, and
we have a lot of hope of this technology, and some have shown good. And you expounded on a lot of the reasons why they haven't gone to. And I like your idea of the Mexican company that is being formed. But I think looking back, it's sad in many ways that this technology has not advanced the way we thought it would advance. But I think maybe your new approach using the Mexican company may be something that could move things forward.
Yeah, I think it's sad for many of us that this technology that we had great hopes actually didn't benefit as many people as we wanted. And it was Mark van Montague who suggested that the way out of this circle that people doesn't want it because it's Monsanto. Monsanto makes profits and they are a monopoly for that. Is to make smaller companies emerge from national institutions to develop technology that is needed in each region. So I think that's a very sensible approach in which we can develop a technology that is going to solve local problems, and it could have even global impact as the one we developed, that it might have a global impact. So that's a solution in which we can get out of this circle and start doing that with a completely different philosophy. The use of the technology.
Right, thank you.